Yes, welcome back. This is A RAP CRITIC. I'm your boy Malik 16. No, I'm not a blue collar worker anymore, but shout out to all blue collar workers out there. I got my pink collar on today. And you could get one too if you go on to raprouleur.com. It's also where you can cast your votes and let us know how high or how low you rank this classic album, because today we're going to put to bed the question of how classic is this classic. And I didn't come alone. I came with my homie. Last time I let her introduce herself, and I feel like she cut herself a little short. So I'm gonna roll out the pink carpet for the homie. Hip-hop journalist extraordinaire, blogger pioneer, and all-around media maven, the one and only Starr Rocque. Y'all might have known her as Gangstar Girl back in the early 2000s. Did I leave anything out? She's also an author, a future podcaster, also super mom. She's a wife. She's a sister. Okay. We are going over the classic album Below the Heavens by Blu Exile, released in 2007, which means it is 15 years old, right?
Yep.
Okay. Math was not my major.
Not mine either. Not my strong suit.
So we spent category 1 talking about the actual product, and this is category 2 where we go over the rap performance on this album. With no further ado, while you take a moment to like and subscribe, we're going to jump right into the first dimension. Dimension 1, personality and charisma. When it comes to personality and charisma on this album, it's the element on most classics that make you care enough to listen all the way through, from song 1 to the end. How much of that do we hear on this project from Blu?
I will say you hear a lot of it in context to the type of album that it was. Like we talked earlier about how, when one of their goals with this album was to kind of bring back that sort of like that classic producer rapper duo. So of course Exile did his thing on the beats, and Blu, his whole steez, I guess, was like steez. I haven't heard that word in so long. Anyway, his whole essence on the album was, I'm a rapper, right? Like I'm the lyricist, but I'm a regular guy. I'm an everyday guy. But even though I'm an everyday guy, I'm still like you. I want to make money in this thing too. And I think keeping those things in mind, I feel like they did a good job of conveying that, because that's pretty much what you get throughout the entire album. And he never let you forget it anyway, lyrically. So.
I was gonna mention that. I think I'll take it a notch further and say I think there's a lost element here. I think Blu kind of revels in being lost. He talks a lot with, like, he uses words of certainty. Like when he's talking about, he goes, matter of fact, I'll say maybe 50%. 50% is boastful claims, like a lot of confidence. I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I know what I want to be. And then you'll hear a lot of the other lyrics betray that and be like, I don't know. Shoot, I'm only 22. I'm figuring things out. I'm walking in the rain. I'm just going to get high. I don't know why I do the things I do. And because of that, I think it has this divided personality effect where if you lean more towards the confident sound and stuff, then you'll be like, oh, Blu is the savior of hip hop. He's every man LA or every man this age group. But if you're paying attention to the other stuff, it's like, oh, this dude, I think we touched on it in our first video, there's insecurities here. And I don't think it's intentional, because there's songs where he's purposely being vulnerable, but I think there's a vulnerability that comes out just from him not knowing. And when we talked in the first video, we uncovered that this album was recorded over years. So not just like 1 or 2, over years. So I think what you hear is the growth. And as we go through some of the other dimensions, we'll talk more on how that affected the rap skills. But personality wise, it's always up to y'all to determine. The whole purpose of this scale is to honestly, look at the albums without and separate yourself from that personal connection. Because I mean, for all of that, you know, we got some trash albums in our lifetimes that we cling to because of what was going on. So how much personality you truly think Blu exhibited? And we say Blu because Exile doesn't pop up until the very last song as a vocalist. Exile plays the role of the beat provider. He comes on the end, and I can say this, the silliness of Exile's rhymes and his little freestyle at the end shows you why he didn't get on top of the mic too often. Yeah, so something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, how much personality and charisma. If there's personality, I'd also add, I don't know how much charisma there was.
That's a good assessment.
Yeah. So what would you give this on that scale from 1 to 5?
I don't think this is necessarily a cast. There's personality, but yeah, like you were saying with the charisma. Because I'm like, I want to give it a 4 though. I still want to give it a 4 because I feel like there's a lot of honesty. I'm not mad at the back and forth and the like. I want to be rich and sign a deal and make money, but then on the flip side, I'm a blue collar worker, girl. Like, what do you want from me? And you know what I mean? I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at the honesty.
Yeah, he's not a contradictory soul. Not at all. Like, there's not. I put this across and then I, take it back. But you hear that inner struggle and this kind of like want to be deeper than you're ready to be. It reminds me of, I started this year off reviewing the Born Sinner album by J. Cole.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people swear by that album the same way that they swear by this. But for, I think, the listeners who have grown up and gotten to see this more mature iteration of J. Cole, you see that he was not quite there yet, that people thought he was there. There's a lot of songs on there where he's trying to be deep. And it's like, oh, you haven't lived long enough. It doesn't flow out of you organically. So by the time you hear J. Cole in his later work, you hear, he's got some life in him. He's got some stories to tell. Blu, we laughed about the one song, In Remembrance Of, where he's telling his life story, and he's only 21.
Like he's an old man, yeah.
And so what does he have to pull from? He's talking about his basketball team in high school.
Right.
Losing his virginity. I'm like, so. All right, that takes us to Dimension 2. The believability or suspension of disbelief. So this is not an album where Blu's going into a character, so there's no suspension of disbelief. We usually reserve that for albums where the rappers are characters, right? So here it's how much do we believe Blu? I think you hit it on the nose. Honesty is Blu's MO. That's all he's got to give. He's got no money in his pockets, but he's got honesty.
That's 100% we believe him.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think he's telling any tall tales here. Every now and then he goes into like pimp talk and talks about how he's getting girls, but the next song he'd be like, well, I don't know how to approach you. I'm trying to get your attention, girl. Two sides of the coin.
Two different sides of the same coin, yeah. Because even having had that experience that I had around him, he didn't really talk, but I could also see maybe he did. Maybe he was getting girls because, I don't know what his approach would have been, but I definitely can see that, like both sides of that being true.
Right, because there'll be lines where he's like, yeah, I know I'm light skinned, and I guess women think I'm cute, even though I'm an underground rapper because I got the light skin thing going for me. I'm like, there's an awareness, but I want. Blu almost, it's like the Hancock effect. It's like he knows what he's capable of, but he doesn't want to. He's like, don't ask me to be a superhero just because I have superpowers.
Right. Oh.
That I feel like that's kind of in there somewhere, and because of that, what he's most of what he talks about is very grounded and easy to believe. Now, when he gets boastful in rap, but then turns around and tells you that he wants to quit.
Right.
Both of those are believable too. It's like, I get it. Anybody who's a rapper also knows that experience. Shoot, you as a writer. So yeah, something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. how believable, how much do we believe Blue? What you giving this on a scale?
We believe Blue 5. I'll give it a 5.
Cool. That takes us to dimension 3, the delivery and the use of voice. So delivery is all about timing, the way the words are put across, and how the voice is cut on this record. There's a familiar timbre and tone to him. He sounds like 3 different rappers put together. I was trying to put my finger on it. How ironic that I got you on here, because in a lot of ways, Blue sounds like another one of your favorite rappers. Emphasis on your, Talib Kweli.
Which it all makes sense because those are some of the inspirations. For those are some of his inspirations, so it all makes sense.
But you know what I'm talking about? Like he has a higher register.
For sure.
It's not high pitch, but it's higher. It's almost like my talking voice right now. Like if someone was to catch me not doing this show, my voice is much deeper. But I guess because I have the camera in front of me, I project much more. I enunciate. When Blue raps, I imagine that his rapping voice is the same as his talking voice. Do you remember what that was like?
Don't remember his talking voice in person. I did see a snippet of him on Dream Champs. That's what I remember. Like it's just a regular voice for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's a very easy to listen to.
He definitely raps with more confidence than he speaks. It sounds like.
Wow, that's a moment right there. We'll pause on that moment. It's still a very easy to listen to tone. I don't think he sounds like Talib Kweli, but they are cut from the same mold, vocal mold, if that makes sense. I'm trying to figure out who else his voice and delivery are reminiscent of, because again, the way he's also putting those words across is very Kweli-ish. Now his timing is more in pocket. It's very rare that he goes off beat or anything, but he's also not doing anything crazy with his voice within his rhymes. If he's rhyming, he's rhyming straightforward. He's not, making sound effects. He's not no other voices, no slick Rick kind of stuff. But he does sing, and this is 2007. When singing was this thing that was, I don't think it was hotly debated anymore, but it was still being debated because it was still relatively in the minority. You can count the rappers who were singing and rapping and getting away with it. And back then, rappers were afraid to call it singing. They would call it anything else but singing. So, unless you were CeeLo Green or Busy Bone. So this was the end of Ja Rule, almost the end of 50, and a lot of other rappers. I think we had Little Brother coming out, so Fonte, and
Fonte could sing too,
and everyone was trying it. Auto-Tune had just came out, so we saw like Diddy doing Last Night. We heard Lil Wayne doing the lollipop thing.
But the purists weren't using Auto-Tune. So like Fonte could sing. He was singing. Blue, he could sing, but he wasn't using Auto-Tune. Blue to me has more of like I'm just playing around doing karaoke kind of voice. Like, it's not a bad voice. It's just, if I'm talking about like Fonte could sing, and he didn't even really put it out there like that. Like, it took a while sometimes for Little Brother fans to realize, oh snap, that singer that we've been hearing on the album is Fonte. Like, and it was really, really good.
It's because this was officially, this was about to be the turning point of rappers saying, I'm singing. Because I think this is like 1 year before Kanye drops 808s and Heartbreaks. That's what changed the game for people being like, no, I sing.
That era was starting, but Drake really kind of propelled it.
By then, we were fully saying we rap and sing. The rapper singers came out the woodwork. Sometimes it almost feels like people be waiting, like it's like being a teenager all over again. Like, I ain't doing it unless somebody else does it. And then the first person gets up and does it, and then everybody else is like, okay, I guess I'll do like skinny jeans.
It's a lot.
Blu's got nothing but compliments in the reviews of this album over the years because his voice is easy to listen to when he's rapping and singing. So that's something for you all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Starring, what are you giving this 1 to 5 for delivery and use of voice?
I'll give him a 5.
Okay.
For not being afraid to sing a hook like on Blue Collar Worker, and that was his and yeah, dancing. What's his
Dancing in the Rain.
In the Rain. I'm actually like that song.
Narrow Path too.
And that was his way of playing with voice and tone.
Yeah.
And I feel like not every rapper needs to go into different voices, and it's probably not necessary. Or maybe they just can't. But I think that was his way of being versatile. And yeah, I appreciate that. I'll give him a 5 for that. Yeah, and then going back to what we were saying about that time, that was pretty brave. Because he did it without auto-tune, as far as we know. I don't think he used any enhancements.
Right. If he did, then it not in the way where it became obvious to the listener.
Right.
That takes us to dimension 4, the flow. Having to take into consideration that this album was recorded across a span of time, a significant span of time. I think you can hear when he wanted to accelerate with his flow and when he wanted to tone it down. So on songs like Cold Hearted, Remembrance of Me, he wants you to hear the words, so he's letting the track breathe and he's just spacing his words out. But when he wants to prove that he can MC on songs like the last song, I Am Blue, or the song Juice and Drink, he's stacking syllables up. I think, on Juice and Drink, he rhymes the whole verse as a hollow rhyme. So he's like, I fight with the mic, right with the rights, and the side to side. And he does that rhyme pattern for the whole verse. So excitement today. I can't quote it. I'm going to put the lyrics up. Y'all know what it is. But he doesn't do that for every song. Some rappers that want to be proving that they MC, right? You already are telling on yourself when you use the word MC. They feel like they need to do that on every song. But he has a fair amount of songs where he just like is straightforward rapping and the words breathe, simple A-B rhyme scheme, and then other times where he's really trying to syllable cluster it up. And it's a steady flow. It's not this acrobatic flow. He's not doing a ton of things that make you go, oh, can't believe he rapped like that, but he's also not basic. It's really hard to put your finger on it because reading his lyrics, you'll pick up on more things that he did within the verses pattern wise than you catch when you hear it. Because again, his delivery and his voice that we talked about in the last dimension makes him just an easy to listen to rapper, and that could also have the effect of easy to zone out and tune out. Like, oh, the song just played, I got lost in the beat. On the song Cold Hearted, it's probably where he does the most intentional pattern shifting. He deviates from being that easy to listen to rapper on that because he's doing a more intricate pattern where he's stopping and starting sentences, dipping in out of a rhyme scheme to catch on to it later. So when he's like, seed killer number 1, seed killer number 2. Oh, and actually that's where he plays with his voice because he does some whispery stuff on there. But he'll go from that back into the pattern he was rapping with and then go back that and match them. So that whole song is intricate. We'll keep talking about that song as we go through the dimensions, but this album shows that he has it in it. And I think this was a precursor for a lot of the flows that Blu wound up exhibiting later on in his other work. So what would you give the flow on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats? And choose what I knew you were gonna say that, so I was like, choose wisely. Giving him a 5 is like saying that he's up there with the flow masters. Like, so like you gonna really put him up there with like the Ludacris's and Busta Rhymes of the world.
Okay. This is a more complex one though. But yeah, no, he's not up there with like a Ludacris. Dang.
Right. So you go. I'm not swaying you. I just wanted to throw that in there because this is not.
Okay.
This is only on this dimension.
There.
This is just the flow dimension.
Let's say 4. He's because it's okay. Because like with like the Ludas and the Busters, it's their thing. Like flow is their thing. Like it's like, I don't know, like it's like weightlifting, and they just know how to do it. They know how to bench 100. Blu definitely is not up there with that because he's still figuring himself out on this album. So
I'll jump in. I'm going, and then I'll give you a minute to collect your thoughts because I'll bring the Kweli conversation back because there's people who rap with a fluidity. I think Blu is somewhere close to fluidity, but there's not a free. He's not a faucet. You know what I mean? I think he's one of those like public bathroom faucets where you might have to like keep pushing down on it to get a continuous stream. And the thing with a rapper, like rappers who rap like this, and we see this a lot in the underground, because when I think of the way Kweli rapped on Twice in a Lifetime, right? When he's like an androgynous misogynist, like you can tell this was, I'm thinking about how to put these words together. We get rappers who do this so seamlessly. Yeah. Like when you get a Nas, the reason that people like rappers on Monkey Frippin' with the funky rhythm I be kicking is because it sounded like it was spilling out of him. Mm-hmm. Another rapper would say that.
That's what I'm trying to say about Luda and Busta.
Another rapper would say that in a more staccato way. I feel like Blu would have let us hear him put an emphasis on it out loud. Some rappers let us hear their process more than others, where some rappers leave us with a, how did they do it? And Blu is somewhere in the middle of those.
That's a great way to put it. And it's harder to talk about flow. Flow is, you feel it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get better at it. There's a really dope channel I like watching called Vox. PBS has like a special series where they like apply music. Yeah, they apply music theory to contemporary stuff. And because I never studied music theory, I don't have the language all the time to count.
I studied music theory and I still don't always have the language. So
yeah, I would love to know how to speak in like meters and iambic pentameter so I can really break down what these rappers do. I try to do it to the best of my ability, but Blu writes in a way where we could tell he used to write poetry. So Flo, what's your final
okay.
number
I'll give
from 1
him
to
4.
5?
I'll give him a 4. Okay. I really do like the intention behind it.
Fair enough. Starring's being really nice. She's putting them up there with the All right, Dimension 5, the wordplay. This is where we talk about the rhetorical devices, the lyrical intent, the bar intent in these verses. So again, having to take into account that this album was recorded over a span of time, my first instinct was to think, from a rapper's mind, I'm like, oh, Blu's being lazy on some verses. And he's putting a lot of effort in some. So you'll hear the differences in songs like I Am Blue and The Juice and Drink, where he's really emphasizing cleverness and connecting words together. And then there's other less inspired songs. Like the last episode, you and I talked about the 2 songs with the word amazing in it. I think it's So Amazing.
It'd be Simply Amazing.
Oh yeah, so on both So Amazing and Simply Amazing, Blu actually attacks these tracks with a lot of confident sounding energy, but what he's saying seems less focused. Like he'll say, I think on So Amazing, he was saying something like, yeah, I'll go into the sun and I'll come back as Jesus Christ on a mic. It wasn't clever. It sounded like he was trying to set it up to be something, but it was just one of those lines like, why are you calling yourself Jesus, just to say it? Then he had another line on the Simply Amazing. I think he said something like, I'm raw, I don't give a ish, I whip out my and take a piss on the tree. I'm like, it was weird, because then he started doing like a bunch of the rhymes that could never work nowadays, like the homophobic type of rhymes, where it was like, I think he uses the shorthand of that term twice, and he's like, "You're a Mo backwards" or something like that. But he had already said the word like 2 bars before, so it's like, is this natural fatigue from writing the whole album, or is this younger you and you hadn't gotten as good as you got?
And now I'm gonna go with younger him, because probably like teenage him is what crept up into that. I feel like, because I think even at that time he's probably, I mean, he's probably a little bit, he was more thoughtful about stuff like that, about what he put out there like that. So that's probably the younger stuff.
It's always interesting to me when you hear different tones of maturity and effort on the same album. So those songs that I mentioned, like Cold Hearted, and the final song, the title track, Below the Heavens, those are so deep and intricate with what he's saying in each line, connected to the point. He never really strays on either of those songs because he wants you to be invested in the point he's making. And he puts that same energy in some of his battle raps. But then there's other songs where he just doesn't stay as focused, even when he's trying to be deep. So I think Good Life and In Remembrance of Me are the songs where he's trying to be deep, but for some reason a song that's more casual, like Dancing in the Rain, has more of that effect because he's creating a mood. He's really painting a picture. So you're going to get a lot of imagery. You're going to get, sometimes you get alliteration. You're going to get lots of similes like you get, and sometimes you even get metaphor. Did you pick up on anything else in the word?
Not really. I'm kind of thinking, and like for that time too, I think he may have gotten a lot more credit because during that time, rappers who seemed thoughtful was like fading, and so at that time it was like he probably got bigged up more than he would have, like if he came out before, like if he had come out earlier, like when that was the thing.
We talked in the first video about the unicorn effect. He was absolutely a unicorn. He's from LA. He's not talking gangbang stuff. He's not crazy looking. And he could rap, and he's rapping over these Dilla sounding beats. And everyone else is saying hip hop is dead. He's the savior. So what would you give him on the scale from 1 to 5?
I give him a 3.
A 3 or so hold on, wait a minute. A 4 on flow because of intention, but a 3 on wordplay.
Because like I didn't pick up that many crazy like moments, and you know, you don't have to have crazy moments all the time, but yeah, for what he was trying to do, like I think he got the point across that he's a good rapper.
Gotcha. So something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. This takes us directly to dimension 6, the punchlines, poetic wisdom, and overall quotability. Same way we talked about the wordplay, you will hear the punchlines here and there. He does this thing with homonyms, which I think is probably one of the highest level of wordplay rap styles, where you're saying words that sound like other words to turn them into entendres. But then he does have punchlines, and you're gonna hear most of them on the song I Am Blue, but there's a song earlier in the album where he goes something to reference the DJ, and he's like, and no cuts, what you think I brought Exile for, or something like that. And I'm like, okay, you can do it when you want to. So you'll get those few and far between. There's some corny attempts. So on the song Juice and Drink, when he's doing that whole hollow rhyme scheme that I talk about, where everything's rhyming with night to the ite, with the ite sounds, he says something, have your girl coming home, like, why don't we fight so I can break up and go with blue and lighten my life. Like it, the way he delivers it was a little corny, but you know,
it's funny to position himself that way. Anyway, given what he was trying to do. Regular guys don't really, that's not a regular guy thing to say.
Well, he was saying, you know, your girl will go home and ask you, why don't you fight, so that they can break up. He didn't execute it in a way where
that was his way of being braggadocio, I guess.
Right.
His way of saying, I'll take your girl.
Right. The setup wasn't clever enough, but it was an attempt, right? Another flat punchline attempt. He said something like, I walk around mad at the world like the sun called me nigga. And I was like, that's a reach, Blu. Like that doesn't even connect.
There's a lot of reaches. There's a lot of reaches.
But what you will get a lot of, which I think is why people gravitate to, is poetic wisdom.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily crazy quotables. Like it's there, but I can't really say like, oh yeah, I'll put down a t-shirt or.
You don't. So if you listen to the title track, Below the Heavens, and the way he's talking about life, so he says, the youth is too stubborn, too stuck on themselves to ever think about others. They must uncover the scales on their eyes called lies, leading the deaf, dumb, and blind to a place my mom told me about, where their sins get cleansed because they bathe in flames, and the only route out is to shout out his name.
That's very poetic, and it's good. It's good. It's really good. It's very. I think there's a lot of that. It's wise. The wisdom is there. What I'm trying to say, the content is rich. It's there.
Right.
But it's not a bar you would walk away with. It's like a really sit down and process. And
I think. So what you're saying, I think if I'm correct now, from what I gather, I feel like you're saying there's not a huge rewind factor, whether we're talking about punchlines or poetic wisdom. No songs are gonna make you go like, let me hear what he said again. Hold on.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't get that from this project.
Gotcha.
And it's not bad just because that's not there for me. But it's like, yeah, it's just not that.
Right. I think like on Good Life, he said something about how can I teach my son about justice when last year I was just in cuffs and something like that. And I'm like, you get them. If you go and revisit these as printed bodies of prose, of literature, then you'll see the poetic value in it. And I think it comes out.
But even esoteric Blu fans, sorry to cut you off, I don't think they're necessarily talking about, oh, this line, that line. It's more of appreciating the poetic value. Because people be having entire arguments about one bar or like one line, or you know what I mean. And this doesn't give you that.
Got you. Yeah, like Dre. I'm sorry, I don't know how I forgot Dre in that. Dre is the king of them, actually.
If you say real talk, I probably won't trust you. Like,
right.
And it's like, oh yeah, that's what you look. There's a set of rap nerds that look for that.
Yeah. And I mean, and the best rappers give us those. Like, oh snap, I didn't even think about that line hard. I just live by it. It's something to live by, right? So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats. What you giving this on 1 to 5?
I guess 1 to 2. Given everything I just said, I'll give it a 2.
You are, when you watch this episode back, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna do my ratings over it.
Oh God.
All right, Dimension 7, concepts. So some have described this as a concept album. In hindsight, it might seem like a stretch. At most, this album might be a loose concept. I don't think it stays on one like narrative path.
Yeah, no.
To call it a concept album. And again, he doesn't ask you to go anywhere with him except for, hey, listen to me, I'm Blu over
this is his offering. Yeah.
He does do, if we talked about the tone, the overall tone is like, we talked about existentialism being a part of it, but I don't think that's what makes it conceptual. Now, there's conceptual songs on here, but even those are loosely. I think the only true concept song is Cold Hearted, and it's been debated what it's actually about, because Blu, I don't think he's ever revealed all the intricacies of how personal this is. He's saying things like the men that his mother dated and how they were seed killers, or these things were seed killers. And then
definitely the domestic violence elements that are in there. I don't know if people really talk about that stuff that much. The people that discuss the album.
But for him being such a straightforward rapper, like, again, when we listen to a song like In Remembrance of, he's saying that in a very paint by numbers way. He's like, oh, when I was 16, I did this, and then I did that. And that song, he's just kind of weaving it in with these other things. And then, like, so even though he's touching on domestic violence, he doesn't stay there long. He goes into another tale, like his friend getting killed.
There's definitely trauma that he experienced that I feel like I wanted more of. Like, throughout the album when you hear him have his moments
I
talking
thought
about some of those things.
those are those glimpses of brilliance where rappers don't do it so straightforward and they give you that to where you have to rewind it. Kendrick does that really well. He always, because it leaves you wanting more. It's like, oh, you gave me depth right here, but you didn't give it all. So now I'm ready for the next where you explain this a little bit more. So he chose to weave, I think, a few autobiographical elements in a very creative way in that song. Same thing with Below the Heavens, you know, that is conceptual. He's talking about all of the ideas in his entire lifetime that he's absorbed about heaven. But unlike Cold Hearted, he doesn't keep it on him. He talks about heaven in just this open discussion way. He's like, let's talk about it. Let's all talk about it. Tell me what you think heaven is. Everything else is loose. Show me the good life, the first verse. He's talking about this hypothetical situation, having a baby, but then after that, he's rapping about money.
Right.
So yeah, there's conceptual stuff, Dancing in the Rain, but that's more story, and we'll get to that in a minute. So concept, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, what are we giving this for conceptual material?
I'll give it okay. And watch me find out there's like a bunch of Blu Exile fans like that act like the Beehive, and then they're gonna come for me, right?
No, you got to give your honest. That's why the site exists, so they can put their own rankings in.
I give it a 3.
All right, so 3. All right, that takes us to the content dimensions. You brought this up already. We put these together usually. So dimensions 8 and 9. For content, dimension 8 will be the externalized content, so that's how much is Blu talking about things outside of himself. And dimension 9 is internalized content, how much autobiographical, expository, inner monologue are we getting. So dimension 8 first. Topically, what's he talking about on this album?
He is human. He is human. He is.
We already heard we touched on domestic violence, right? Oh, but that's not outside.
Still figuring it out.
So let me see. Well, the Heaven song is just about existence, right? Life, like you said. He talks a lot about being unemployed or being employed on a blue collar level, whether he's talking to women or not. He spends a lot of time talking about that. He talks about women. He has songs, you know, completely dedicated to getting with a woman, like First Things First and Blue Collar Worker. And he talks about questioning the industry and the rap game. So, yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount of content. Most of it revolves around him. He's only talking about his lived experience or adjacent experiences. You're gonna get mostly internal content because of that.
And because of who he introduced himself as.
Yeah. So. Now, does he do a good job of giving us him and talking about stuff?
I think he does. Again, I definitely did want more of like the domestic violence stuff in terms of like, because for someone who is like, he's saying he's a regular guy, so what impact did that have on you? Because it sounds like you're disturbed by it. It's like you get that enough, but domestic violence is cyclical too. So how does that affect you as your everyday guy or regular guy? Like, have you, you know, I don't know if maybe you didn't want to put it out there, like, have you had moments where you were repeating cycles, or like, what are you doing to break cycles? So yeah.
Yeah. I think he's made it kind of clear that he has this kind of avoidant personality. When things get hot, he wants to get away. Like, even on songs like No Greater Love, where he is giving you a glimpse of how he approaches like real relationships. It's like you get the indication from some lines that if he gets too pissed, he'll just like leave. You know, I need space, get away from me, or he'll just disappear. Blu definitely seems like a ghost. He'll ghost
I was like, oh,
anything.
yeah, for sure.
I walk off
Ghosted
this
that
job.
photo
I'll
shoot.
leave the industry. I walk out on this baby.
He ghosted the photo shoot, and he was freaking still there the entire time. He was there, but he wasn't. So he had to be prompted to speak, and just maybe like say like he's very intuitive. A lot of creatives are very intuitive and empathic. That can be a lot too. It could have just been a draining situation for someone like him, which is also potentially why he just got so quiet. Because I've been in situations like that where like there was just so much going on that I just kind of like I just shrunk and almost damn near disappeared.
One thing he gives a lot of his life story even when he's battle rapping, which for some I think it might have the Chance the Rapper effect where you know you hear Chance overload of him saying I love my wife, I love my wife. With Blu, it's him always talking about, you know, who he's the son of, how old he is, and how broke he is. And this is like, why are you slipping that into battle rap, bro?
Right.
And it's interesting where you say like he didn't give enough and he teased, because for someone to have these two different types of father figures that are like opposites of each other. I don't think he clarified a lot on this album at what points which father influenced what, because he'd be like, yeah, I'm the son of a pimp, but then he'd in the same breath he'd be like, I'm the son of a preacher. I'm like, bro, which one is it? So
right. And I know it's some like the latter part of his life he ended up moving in, so it's kind of like, why were you with the first set of parents all these years? You know, there's stuff there that's worth exploring, I'm sure.
Yeah, he just alludes to a lot. He says, you know, I've been out on the street. He mentions a lot of times that he was homeless, that he was on the streets on his own. Why'd you go out on your own? But you still have the kind of mother who will listen to your song and tell you you're too young to make the song. So it doesn't sound like you have the most broken family life, but there's something in there that is broken. So it's not us being thirsty for like gossip and it's just that you opened the door and left them open with your rap. So I think that's what happens with the content here. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. So for Dimension 8 external content, things outside of them, what are you giving them on a scale from 1 to 5?
I'll give it a 3.
Okay. And for the internal,
I'll give it a 4.
Okay. All right, that takes us to the final dimension, y'all. Dimension 10, storytelling. How well does he tell stories on this album? Are there any stories on this album?
There's stories. It's not, I wouldn't describe him as a storyteller. Some rappers are storytellers, like a Slick Rick or like a Nas. And Most Def when he wants to be.
Right.
The stories aren't. He's not necessarily a storyteller. He's more of like the stories are there, the bits and pieces of the stories are there, but I wouldn't describe him as a storyteller.
Yeah, I think he does storytelling often, but I think what you're pointing at is how memorable are these, and this goes to what I wanted to say earlier about, since you mentioned Most Def. I think somewhere between Most Def and Mike Geronimo is where we get Blu. And Mike Geronimo in the sense that most casual hip hop fans do not know Mike Geronimo. He has a significant presence in the hip hop industry, but not a significant impact because his presence was quiet. And I think Blu's entire presence is quiet, despite what he does in his boastful raps and what he did with this album. Because of that, there's a quieted giantness there. And Most Def is one of those rappers that people love, but he never comes up in the lyricist conversation. You don't hear him mentioned the same way you hear Black Thought mentioned.
And Most can rap and sing.
And Most can rap and sing, and he doesn't get a lot of credit for his singing either, because he has a very unorthodox tone and approach to it. But with Most is another rapper that if you read their lyrics, you would appreciate the poetic sensibility. Now, I don't want to compare him to Moses' level because I think Moses is a way more refined rapper. The intent and the structure of his raps were way more, and the confidence was there. Most of someone who believed in what he believed in from the beginning. He knew,
and he said what he said. Like there is no like I want more, or like, you know, it doesn't feel not incomplete, but it's very direct.
It's very direct, and he doesn't need the tricks that other so-called lyrical rappers need to be considered lyrical. So somewhere between that Mos Def, where you don't realize that he is a lyricist because of the simplicity and the quiet presence of like the Mike Geronimo, is the Blu effect. And that's why the stories are easy to overlook. There's stories on almost every other song here. So In Remembrance of Me is a story song. First Things First is a story song. The first verse of Good Life is a story. The whole Cold Hearted is a story. Even the way he starts talking about the title track is in a narrative form. He's like, my mother told me about this place. My grandfather, my uncle told me about this place called hell, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to speak about stuff in a more general sense. But they're all throughout. But they're not these memorable, like, oh, because they're not stories with a twist. He doesn't pull you into this new world.
Right. And it's not like point A to, from point A to B to C. It's it feels more like just getting this off my chest.
Yeah, very few of them are linear. There's not a lot of linear elements at all. So whether you think that's a weakness or a strong point, that's something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Starring for the very last time, what are you giving us on a scale from 1 to 5?
A 3.
Okay. And that, my friends, concludes our Category 2 review and analysis of the classic album, Below the Heavens by Blu Exile. And Starrine, can you tell them where they can find you at, what you got cooking up, what they should be looking out for?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Starr Rocque, STARR_ROCQUE, and that is usually where I will update about all the things that I am working on. I do have some articles in the works with American Urban Radio Network. American Urban Radio Network is I think it's the #1 Black-owned radio station, and it's owned by Stevie Wonder. He doesn't really like putting it out there like that, but I'm gonna put it out there. But I've been working with the team to build up its digital content, and I write for Mike.com, and right now those are the two. Every now and then I might pop up somewhere else, so the best thing to do is just follow me on social media and you'll know when I'm working on something.
There you go. And I will have Starrine back in the future. We'll do more album talk. And thank y'all for joining us. Y'all know what it is. As always, F a rap critic. They talk about it while I lived it. Words and math. Thanks, Starrine.
No problem. Sounds good.